Good afternoon, everyone. We continue our study in the book of Judges, and we are now towards the end of the book in chapter 19. Now, the last few chapters from chapter 17 onwards, with the episode of the idols of Micah, in chapter 18, with regards to the tribe of Dan. Now, much of what is happening here is really happening way ahead of time, not right after Samson. And so we saw in chapter 18, uh, and we had an understanding that the tribe of Dan had actually went to search for a new place to live, and that would be in book of Joshua in chapter 19, verses 47 and 48. And it was during the time of Joshua that happened. Now, today we come to another passage, which is a very troubling passage. And it's in chapter 19 and 20 that sees some really strange episodes that regards to some sexual assault, as well as a call to destroy a particular tribe. So let's begin looking in chapter 19, and very quickly, it tells us this. And then, and then it came to pass in those days where there was no king in Israel. So this is before Saul. So always notice the judges are not called kings. Whenever you talk about this word Melech, and with regards to Israel, Saul is the first king of Israel. And that there was a certain Levite. Now understand that Levites do not have an inheritance. So let's take a look at some of the geography. He was staying in the remote mountains of Ephraim. And so if you take a look at this, if this was Judah, then this would be Benjamin. And then you will have Ephraim. This by way of a logical way of drawing. So this certain Levi, he actually lived here on the mountains of Ephraim. Then it says here, he took himself a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. And so right here, which we would put a note, this would be Bethlehem. And every time you find the word Bethlehem, it always predicated with a particular location, because there are two Bethlehems in the Bible, one in Judah and one north towards the Galilee region. So this one is in Judah. And so next word that we need to understand is a concubine. Now a Levite can marry. So understand this. Uh, uh, a concubine is not, how should we say, she does not have the full rights of uh, uh, a wife, I would say. So let me just explain. There is this word here that's missing. Uh, he took for himself a wife of concubine. I think that would be a better way of expressing. So let me explain. First of all, a wife is usually translating the word Isha, which is woman. This word here, concubine, is uh, Pilegesh, right? And so this would be a concubine, and the word is Pilegesh. And so clearly, we must take note that the idea of a wife with full rights is Isha. A woman who is married as a concubine is a Pilegesh, and she does not have the full rights of a, a wife, if you want to put it that way. Now, why is that the case? Maybe she was not a free woman. Now, what do you mean, not a free woman? She would be a Jew because she lives in Judah, but she may be poor and she have come from a poor family, and in so doing, she could have been what we call a maid servant, who is serving out perhaps a debt. And this Levite had actually taken interest in her and had married her like a wife, but not having exactly the privileges of a full wife. And that is why this word Pelegesh is used instead of Isha. Now, we'll spend another time talking about this with the differences. You find this also in the book of Esther. Then it says, but his concubine played the harlot against him. Uh, and this idea of played the harlot uh, is not quite, how should we say? Um, the idea here is she left him. I think that would be a better way. She deserted him instead of playing the harlot, right? She deserted him. Now, the word in Hebrew actually gives us a picture of the fact that now uh she had committed adultery of sorts. Uh, but the word itself suggested that, and so she left and went away from him. Notice he did not send her away, which means that he was okay with her. But she went away to her father's house at Bethlehem in Judah and was there for 4 whole months. Then her husband arose, went after her to speak kindly to her and bring her back, having his servant, a couple of donkeys with him, and she brought him to her father's house. When the father of the young woman saw him, he was glad to meet him. So all of these is part and parcel of a narrative, not much of a problem. Now his father-in-law, the young woman's father, detained him, kept him there. Now this word detain in verse 4 is not so much as lock him up, I guess. You could say that he he was insistent. Insistent. What this means in Hebrew is that he he strongly encouraged him or strongly insisted him to stay. That is what this word really means. Not detain him by locking him up, but by strongly insisting that he stay. And so, and then he stayed with him 3 days. They ate and drank, and he lived there. So, in that culture, eating and drinking is very much part of the pastime. Verse 5. And then it came to pass on the 4th day, they arose early in the morning. He stood to depart. But the young woman's father said to his son in law, oh, let's not do that. So refresh your heart. In verse 5, refresh your heart, support your heart or support or strengthen. I think strengthen might be better. Strengthen yourself with a bit of bread. So this word morsel of bread is a very English word. Uh, the idea here of morsel is a piece or a fragment of bread. Just have some bread. And then afterward, you can go your way. Verse 6. And then they sat down, the two of them ate and drank together. Then the woman's father said to the man, this is in verse 6, and says, well, why don't you stay the night and be happy? Verse 7, and then the man stood to depart. His father in law uh, entreated him. Now, this word here is to entreat, or this word here is urge. Entreat, urge, press. The father in law looks very insistent. Press him to stay there again. And so he did in verse 8. And then he rose early in the morning on the fifth day to depart. And then the young woman's father said, please refresh your heart. And so they delayed until afternoon, meaning they had something to eat, and both of them ate. And when the man stood to depart, he and his concubine and his servant, and in these were the people who were traveling, all right, the Levite, the concubine, the servant, so he's up to here. And then the young woman's father said to him, look, the day is now drawing towards evening. Stay the night. See, the day is coming to an end. Stay here. Let your heart be merry. Tomorrow you can go early and then you can get home and or to your tent. Right? This word here, home, is to your tent. Now, so far, we have come to a point where the young woman's father has been insistent and to keep him in Bethlehem. Verse 10. Verse 10 tells us the man was not willing to spend another night. So he rose, departed, and came opposite this place called Yebus. Yebus is present day Jerusalem. That's Jerusalem. And so, by way of indication, this one tells us it was really before, right? Before 2 Samuel chapter 5, because David had taken the Jebusite stronghold, and this place is called Jebus or Jebus. And it is a stronghold that is on top of a mountain. And that was the place that David had conquered and then renamed it to the city of David. And so by verse 10, we now can see that chapter 19 is not part of first or second Samuel because it was before the time there was a king. Now, perhaps chapter 19 may have happened during the time of Samson, right? But it was not told to us exactly when, but it's perhaps maybe after the time of Samson, but during that 40 years of the Philistine rule. With him were two saddle donkeys, his concubine with him. And so they were near Jebus, and the day was far spent. The servant said to his master, come, please, let us turn aside into this city of the Jebusites, and we stay there. Now remember, the Jebus or Jebus, the Jebusite city, is not an Israelite city. It is a place where neither the people from Judah and Benjamin had taken it, because it was not a place that you can just walk in and conquer. And so it was left there alone. Now, the tradition has it that it is probably because the fact that Abraham made a pact with Avimelech. Now, that's part of a tradition. So, but whatever it is, this place, Jebus or Yebus, that is eventually called Jerusalem, is still there, and the Jebusites are still there. But his master said to him, "We will not turn aside into a city of foreigners." Now, verse 12 says they are foreigners, they are non Israelites. That's what it means. That's not our people. They are not of the children of Israel. We will go to Giv'ah. Now, the word is pronounced Give. So he said to his servant, "Come, let us draw near to one of these places and spend the night in Giv'ah or Ramah." And they passed by and went their way. The sun went down near Giv'ah, which belongs to Benjamin. And so now we have a place here. Giv'ah. So they turn there aside and going to lodge in Giv'ah. And when they went in, he sat down in the open square of the city, for no one would take him into his house to spend the night. It appears to be a tradition as a Levite, a man of God, that the people would actually entertain him and take care of him because he doesn't have any land, he doesn't possess any. The people there did. And so, as the Levites go, they are to be taken care of by the people of the place. Verse 16. In verse 16, behold, an old man came from his work in the field at the evening, and he was also from the mountains of Ephraim, and he was staying in Giv'ah, whereas the men of the place were Benjamites. Now, what does this tell us is this: the old man went to the field, he was from the mountains of Ephraim, and so he was an Ephraimite. But now he is at a place in Giv'ah, and they were Benjamites. So right here in the place of Benjamin, he was from Ephraim, but he was passing through as well. And when he raised his eyes, he saw the traveler in the open square of the city. Open square means a large plaza. Uh, and no one can ignore him, or no one can mistake him for a traveler. The old man said, "Where are you going, and where do you come from?" And so he said to him, "We are passing from Bethlehem to Judah toward the remote mountains of Ephraim. I am from there. I went to Bethlehem in Judah. I'm now going to the house of the Lord." This is Shiloh. And so what we find now is this: Shiloh is here. So we now know that this Levite is serving in Shiloh, went down to Bethlehem, and is coming back and is stopped at Giva. And he said, "Well, no one here is going to entertain me, right? No one here will take me into his house. Although we have both straw and fodder for our donkeys, we can take care of ourselves. And I have bread and wine for myself, for your female servant, for the young man who is with your servant. There is lack of nothing." Verse 20, the old man said, "Peace be to you." This is one of the local way of greeting. I guess you can say that. And this is uh, typically today it will be Shalom Aleichem, right? Typically, it should be Shalom Aleichem. Here it's just Shalom Lak. So peace to you. So not peace with you. So Shalom Aleichem would be peace be with you. In the Arabic is Assalamu alaikum. But typical, what we call Semitic people's greeting is always about peace, shalom. So remember, modern day, shalom aleichem. In this verse itself, it is shalom lak. It is literally peace to you. However, let all your needs be my responsibility. Now, this idea is very important because of the idea of a tent. The owner of a tent will take care of any visitor whom the owner welcomes in, and the owner is obligated to provide and to protect. This is the custom of the place. And so he says, come in and I will take care of everything. Do not spend the night in the open square. So he brought him into his house, gave fodder for the donkeys, and they washed their feet, they ate, and they drank. We come to verse 22. And from verse 22, we begin to see similarities with Sodom and Gomorrah. Back in Genesis chapter 19 and 20, God had sent the angels there to rescue Lot. And there we have the narrative of what actually happened. And there was a lot of things that is similar, and there are a lot of things that is dissimilar. But the things that is similar are sexual crimes. And it is, in fact, an interest in gay sex or sex between men. So as they were enjoying themselves in the house, so always remember they were in the house or in the tent. Suddenly, now we read this, certain men of the city. In the situation in Sodom, it was all the men that was in Sodom. Here it is certain men, and they were described as perverted. Now, this word perverted men, uh, I guess you can call them the good for nothing, right? Good for nothing. They were people with no no standards and no law. They were wicked. They were they have no use for others. They were bullies. They had nothing better to do. So you can think of them as, well, some something of the place. People who thinks that they can bully others. And so they came to surround the house and beat on the door. They spoke to the master of the house, the old man, and they said, bring out the man who came to your house that we may know him. So you need to actually then look at the Hebrew, uh, and the word is man. And and I guess the idea of man here is the male gender. The Levite, basically. That we may know him. And so you can look at Genesis chapter 4, verse 1. It is a Hebrew euphemism. What it means is it is an alternative word that softens the actual word. The idea here that we may know him is by a crude way saying that we may have sex with him. Now we come to verse 23. This is, and then the man, the master of the house, the old man, went up to them and said to them, "No, my brethren." Why are they called brethren? These were Benjamites. They are brethren because the old man is from Ephraim or an Ephraimite. And so he says, I beg you, do not act so wickedly. Now, in verse 23, the idea of wicked here is ra, meaning evil. Do not be evil because you don't behave to hurt other people. Seeing this man has come into my house, do not commit this outrage. Now, this word outrage comes from the same concept. This is senseless. This is a, a foolishness, right? A foolishness. Don't do this, meaning don't demand to have sex with this man. And that is purely because having sex with a man is prohibited in the book of Leviticus, that you shall not sleep with a man as if a woman. And so that in itself is a crime. I guess you can call it a crime to itself. And then the old man said this, look, here is my virgin. This word is Batula, meaning young girl who has never had sex before. And then there is in verse 24, the man's concubine. Let me bring them out now so that it is more of a man and a woman. Now, obviously, at this point in time, as we read it in modern day terms, it really, really sounds very vile. Now, even as an alternative, how could this happen? But we must remember this is in the setting of the then day. And yes, it does appear to be an extreme case. That's why it is placed here. Chapter 19 is placed at the end because it is a horrible, horrible situation. And so this word here, humble them and do with them as you please, is a phrase that is to allow the two women to be subject to them, that they can that these certain men, like these certain men, can occupy themselves with the women, but to this man do not do such a vile thing. Now, I suppose that in this particular situation, the man is a Levite, one who serves God, and that would be more vile because he'll be sleeping with a man and also forcing himself upon a man of God in that sense. Is that any better than offering the women to be used by the man? In our terms, obviously not. But this is how the story went. That there is the daughter and the man's concubine who had perhaps committed adultery and went home. But the man would not heed him. And so, what happened that we know in verse 25, the man took his concubine and brought her out to them. And so, we are now beginning to see that this man is the Levite. Took his concubine, who went home because of sexual sin, and went out and brought her to them. And so, what we now read in verse 25 is really, really horrible. So, we have this, and they knew her. The word knew her means they had sex with her. It's a euphemism. And then the next word that is important for us to understand is abuse her all night until morning. Now, this word abuse her is to, I guess you could say, um, act severely. Act severely. Uh, yes, I guess you can call it gang raped her. But see, this is a situation where uh, we only have words that describe, and the words are telling us that the concubine was the one that has been offered to them, and they had sex with her, and they dealt with her in a severe way the whole night until morning. And then in the morning, when the day began to break, meaning it was still dark and the light was about to break, they let her go. And so at this point in time, she was still alive. Verse 26. And then the woman came as the day was dawning. When the sun was coming out, she fell down at the door of the man's house where her master was till it was light. And it is understood by such words that she was exposed and died because of the elements. Verse 27. When would be and then. Remember all these and then. We don't know how long it was from 26 to 27. All right. She was still alive here. And then when she came down, she fell at the door. She was still alive, but sometime before the morning, she died. So when her master arose in the morning, opened the doors of the house, went out to go his way, there was his concubine fallen at the door of the house with her hands on the threshold, which is the front porch, trying to crawl back in. Now, this was a very strange narrative because he was about to leave. Because he wasn't expecting the concubine to come back. But she did. And she was there on the threshold. And then he said to her, "Get up and let us be going." But there was no answer. So the man lifted her onto the donkey, and the man got up and went to his place. His place would be in Ephraim, right here, right? Somewhere near Shiloh. Now, what this means is that without saying a whole lot, there was no answer. No answer means no reply. And this is probably no movement, and by which time she had died. And that's why many commentaries said that she had died out of exposure, right? Out of exposure. So she brought the concubine's body and went back to his place in Ephraim. Verse 29. When and then he entered his house, he took a knife, and I guess you could say he took something that he used to eat with. Now that is the word here. The word knife is not your regular word knife. This would be he took an instrument for eating. Now remember, in those days they had no chopsticks and it was not a fork and knife kind of scenario, but it means that there is something that he used for eating, and if it was an animal, they would have to have a big knife to cut it up, and so that was that instrument. So don't think of modern day as a modern table laid out with a steak knife. He took a big knife, I would think, laid hold of his concubine. The idea of lay hold is to take uh, the concubine, and and then he, this word here is um, natak. Natak is, it says here, divided her. The word here literally means dismember her. Now, the word dismember her is a very vivid imagery. It is to remove at the joints. So understand that this is not about chopping her up. And so by dividing her, dismembering her, removing her at the joints, he actually did it into 12 pieces. Understand why? Because the 12 pieces represents the 12 tribes of Israel. And so he did it limb by limb. So this idea of limb by limb is not uh it is not is connected with this divide limb by limb, right? Is divide limb by limb. That would be the way to explain the word into 12 pieces, and then send all the pieces throughout all the territory of Israel. That would mean 12 places. It is likely when he sent this part of the woman, he probably sent with the part uh, with some explanation, but not all, with some, because in chapter 20 there was a lengthy explanation. And so when they saw it, he says this: no such deed had been done or seen from the day the children of Israel came up from the land of Egypt until this day. And this was to seek to have a conference. Now, verse 30 is a very important expression, I guess you can say that, um, because this is a symbolic uh, call to all 12 tribes. Uh, and it says in a symbol that the they cannot live in parts, right? The parts cannot live, they must come together. And so the idea here is the parts cannot live apart. And so symbolically, it is to come together, a call to confer, right? Consider it, confer, and speak up. So now the whole idea is really to come together, all 12 tribes, that they have seen the parts of the woman as a symbol to tell them that there is a need to come together and act as a whole. And with this, we come to the end of our session today. A very gory, strange, and vile passage that mirrors a little like the story of Sodom, except that in this case, just some men did it. But generally, it is troubling the entire nation. And so, with this, we come to the end of our session.